Welcome back. Welcome back. Great to hear that there's so much and so many things to be exchanged amongst all of you already. Welcome back. My name is Sophie Derkzen. I'm a journalist working for the VPRO, Dutch television broadcasting company, radio, television. But here today to introduce our keynote speaker. As I've been informed, you have been brainstorming, trying to foresee the future of journalism this morning. Well, the interesting thing is that our next guest will at least say that you have to, look suspiciously at everyone who says he or she is able to predict the future. So let's see how far we get today. This spring, she published Prophecy, Prediction, Power, and the Fight for the Future from Ancient Oracle to AI. I would say, but I'm just curious to hear whether she agrees that she is an oracle herself, being a philosopher at Oxford, teaching, being in the board of Proton, advising UNESCO, all the time working on the ethics of AI. In this book, she explores how AI relies on prediction, how big tech rose to power, promising insight into the future, to your very good health, while making, as she argues, the rest of us less safe. Let's see what her book, what her story implies for us journalists. Here is Carissa Véliz. Carissa, thank you very much. I'm sorry about the optics. I mean, what are the chances that we would choose totally misfitting colors? We should have asked AI in advance. Let's, consider this color blocking. But let's start maybe with a slightly more personal round. You're a philosopher at Oxford, advising many boards and governments. Plenty of wannabe prophets have warned for the dangers of AI. In what sense are you any different than those prophets? You just said, I think I'm the anti-oracle. Why?
Because I don't know what the future holds, and I don't pretend to know what the future holds. And actually, that's one reason I wrote this book, because the unfailing question I get from almost every journalist I've ever had an interview with is, what is the future of privacy? Unfailing. And of course, I have no idea. And more importantly, it depends on you. So you tell me, what are you going to do for privacy? Are you going to download Signal? Are you going to,
Is that one of the annoying questions you get?
Yes, that is one of them. And so, I want people to change from this attitude of, I want to discover the future as if it was a script already written, to, I want to build the future.
In your book, I'm going to come up with some more annoying questions. In your book, you describe how big tech gained power by promising insight into the future. It is witty, I would say. Favorite phrase, algorithms resemble their creators the way dogs resemble their owners. It is alarming. Algorithms are often the hitmen sent by companies to carry out their will to power. I was just curious, you just said that you felt being a bad cop, being optimistic in pessimistic times. What was your predominant emotion whilst writing the book? I couldn't really define.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a long book.
384 pages.
And it was hard to write. And I don't know what to say. I think mostly it was an emotion of curiosity, philosophical curiosity about life. So as you know, it's quite a personal book, which is in great contrast to Privacy is Power, in which I say nothing about myself. And it's about how do we face hardship and challenge and challenges to democracy with intelligence and being realistic, but with optimism and with creativity and also with comedy. It's about how do we use the light in life to fight the shadows.
So the predominant mood would be curiosity.
Curiosity.
there's also a lot of warning in the book. I mean, you warn, and you just did this again, how AI enables authoritarian methods. You predict monstrous forms of uncontrollability. Because you just said it is a slightly more personal book. To what extent are you more aware of those dangers due to your own family history? I mean, you do every now and then refer to your grandparents who fled fascist Spain.
Yeah. But I think we all have personal stories, and for every person here, there was something it was like for your grandparents to live through the Second World War, otherwise you wouldn't be here. When you reflect on your own life, the things that have happened to you, the most important things that have happened to you were probably the most unpredictable. And that's probably also the case for your parents and grandparents. And it's partly about how predictions can trip us up, how our minds tend to gallop into the future, which is something that can be very helpful and allows us to make hypotheses and imagine better worlds and look after them. But it can also trip us up in terrible ways. So yeah, there's a lot about that. And there's also, I think, something common for us, for everyone, about thinking, what would you be willing to give up for a warning before the most terrible thing in your life happens to you? Maybe it already has happened. What would you have given to avoid that? And I think that is a feeling that pushes us into the grip of prediction.
I read you begin your philosophy classes by reminding your students that statistically their lives are likely to crumble to rubble at least twice. Maybe because you just came up with some catastrophic examples, what would you like to remind us Dutch journalists of by the beginning of this class?
That you're all going to die. Sorry to give you the bad news.
As journalists, I mean professionally, or as human beings?
Both. And so you have this window of opportunity, and it's so precious, and it's an adventure. And what are you going to do with it? You have one chance.
Okay, I'm trying to bring it back to AI for now. Let's keep the bigger questions maybe for the bar afterwards. In your book, you point out how AI is undermining both journalism and democracy. So let's try to zoom in what is going wrong. You have the cream of the crop of the Dutch journalism before you here today. What is, let's say, the most important misconception about AI that you would like to clear up with them?
I think two things. One is that AI is new, and of course it's new in many ways, but it's old as well. And one of the lessons I got from writing the book, which I wasn't clear about when I started writing, it's something that you discover along the way researching, is the very long history of relying on numbers to obscure accountability and to try to foster trust in the citizenry and try to make them forget that people come up with the numbers. We use numbers because we don't trust people, but we forget that it's people who come up with the numbers. And that is a very clear pattern, and AI is just the latest iteration. And it makes things even more opaque, but it's more of the same. So to look for patterns that are already there, because it will help us understand better what's going on and not get too distracted by the details. And the second very important thing is that even though AI is a technological advancement, there is a very important distinction between technology and science. And it is wrong to assume that because somebody's using AI, that's science or scientific. Not necessarily. AI is a tool, and it can be used in very unscientific ways, both in science and in politics, especially in politics. In science, we don't know if AI is making science worse overall. I was just mentioning in a previous conversation how The Lancet just published a paper last month about how fake citations in academic journals, medical journals, have gone up 12-fold since 2023, and that's really serious for science. The same thing is happening in the justice system. We already have cases that have been, logged, and they have fake citations. In some cases, quite important lawsuits. And for systems like the UK and the US that depend on previous cases, it's a very serious thing. And how AI is being used in politics in ways that are creating self-fulfilling prophecies and that are obscuring huge injustice. And, final point, that predictions are dangerous because they're not facts. So when we use them in areas in which justice should be the prime value, we are probably creating injustice. Because if I reject an opportunity, whether it's a loan application or a job application or a bail application, on the basis of clear criteria and facts, you can contest that decision and you can show that I'm wrong. But if I reject your loan application because of a prediction, you cannot argue against a prediction because it's not a fact, it's not verifiable, it's not falsifiable. And that's a very bad idea.
But you could argue journalists are trained to separate facts from speculation, source verification, fact-checking, polls presented with margins of error. Is that journalistic toolkit no longer sufficient then?
Yes, I think we have forgotten that predictions are not facts. And in at least two ways. One is, it's so often the case that I find predictions from tech executives in particular being reported on as facts. So, Peter Thiel says that this is the future. What is the implication? And assuming that that is going to be correct. But the second thing is, journalists are not calling out enough these processes that are creating injustice. So being mindful of predictions is a very useful conceptual tool to criticize what governments and other institutions are doing.
But if I would put it very directly, if you say tech executives are the prophets of today, as a journalist, how do you avoid fulfilling a prophecy that is based on interest-driven AI? Is that possible at all?
So one option is not to report on it. Sometimes I think we're giving too much attention to people who do not deserve it. But are
you concretely suggesting not to interview, tech experts, or what do you mean by not writing about it?
Not giving them as much attention as we are. Maybe we should give other people more attention. And yeah, in some cases, when somebody says something outrageous, it's not entirely clear to me that we should always report on it, or depending on the prominence, we maybe shouldn't make it, on the first kind of story. When you used to say front page, I don't know if that applies anymore with online pages, but yeah, front page. And the second way is to very actively criticize it, to call attention to the fact that this is a prediction, that there's a financial interest behind it, and all the ways in which this might not pan out, or we might not want to, and how do we fight it? So to frame it in a different way.
I want to zoom in a bit further on the usage of AI in the newsroom. You criticize the large language models for their weak connection to truth. You say they're dangerous to use in journalism. When news organizations use AI tools to optimize headlines or content, it can lead to what you call a convergence in narratives, cultural monoculture. What stories do you think are structurally never told because of the usage of AI?
I don't know, and that's maybe part of the problem. That very often we don't know what we're missing out on because we're missing out on it. And I worry about this in academia and in journalism. I think our jobs are very complementary, and we have quirky jobs in the sense that even the cynics among us are the idealists of society. And, because nobody goes into academia or journalism for the money. And we play a very important function in society as guarantors of truth. And so in these areas, it's particularly sensitive to use large language models. Both because they are framing the agenda too often, and because they can lead to mistakes and untruths. So already, I don't know if you saw this, but I was quite shocked Already the New York Times has had at least one example in which a journalist cited a politician and the citation was not true. It was produced by AI.
Well, I would say in the Netherlands too, there are examples of journalists using AI to fabricate quotes. Even former editors-in-chief proved unable to resist that temptation. But just to get it right, would you say news organizations would they be better off not using those AI tools? Or do you see possibilities how AI can actually strengthen journalism?
I think that in general they should not be using AI, or should be using it in very limiting ways related to very limited tasks. So for example, if you are, so today I had an interview, and the journalist was using an AI to transcribe our interview and was taking notes and had written the book. So as long as you are enough of an expert to actually check that that's going to be okay, then it's fine. But if you're tired, if you can easily overlook something important, and so there's always a risk. But within this, I also want to call attention to the fact that it's very important which product you choose, and it matters a whole deal. AI is too broad. And it shocks me. Oh yeah, so something I don't want to leave without saying is, I worry a lot about when I get an email from journalists and I realize that the email provider that they're using is Google, and they are researching Google. But the same thing goes with AI. So if you're using ChatGPT and you're investigating Microsoft, well, maybe not the best idea. And there are alternatives. There are alternatives in which you can have your own server, you can have your own GPU, and you can have your own AI, and it can work as well as the usual suspects. And so if you're going to use AI, use it very carefully, use it for very limited tasks, check it multiple times, be sure that you're enough of an expert to check it, because if you're not, then it's going to create the same kind of problems. And use one that you have absolute control of the data, that it's in no one else's computer.
But you are in the board of Proton, offering a European alternative for American tech. Most media here rely on digital systems hosted by the very companies they're expected to follow critically. You see that as problematic, as I understand you, right? Hugely
problematic.
And what's the shock? You just said you were shocked, and then you took another road.
Oh yeah, I'm shocked when I get an email from a journalist from a Google email provider, from from Gmail or something.
Yeah, but then maybe zooming out a bit towards the more geopolitical picture, the big question, of course, is how on earth we in the EU are still going to play a role with the billions being invested in US tech. I mean, all ethics are thrown overboard now in Brussels to face the competition with China. What is your prophecy for European-produced ethical AI? I mean, is that ever possible? What do you think?
Yeah, it's possible for sure, and it's up to us. And one example is Proton, and yes, I'm on the board, so full disclosure, but I'm not paid for it, and I'm there because I believe in it, and that is an alternative, and it does include Lumo as a large language model.
But do you still, let's say, see a future for example, agentic AI for the EU to elaborate on that path? Because we now see that the major mass market project in the EU is, of course, generative AI, and then we only have Mistral.
So, well, it's not only Mistral. There's Lumo and there's others. And there's Empathy AI, which I highly recommend as well. So I am quite wary of agentic AI. And the devil is going to be in the details. But at the moment, the way big tech is cashing it out is the perfect surveillance tool, because you have to give it everything, access to all your contacts, all your messages. And then even if you have Signal, it's worth nothing, because Signal is only safe and encrypted if you're the only one who has access to it. The moment you include an agentic AI, it's essentially kind of breaking encryption. And so I am not sure that this is a good idea at all, but it depends on the details. And what I would really like to see for Europe is innovation, is young people saying, no, this product is shoddy, it's just not good enough, and more importantly, it doesn't support democracy, and it doesn't support journalism. So how do we build a better product, a product that is actually safe, and that embodies our values? Because AI, as it's currently designed, is perfect for authoritarianism, not only in the amount of surveillance it depends on, but also in the way it creates bullshit, in the technical philosophical sense of assertions that have no relation to truth, that are not lies, they're not truth, they're bullshit in that the AI is not designed to track truth. And so what I would really like to see is a different kind of AI, an AI that is built for democracy, by people, for people.
But do you see that happening? Do you think we get it together in the EU?
It depends on us. Are we going to try? Are we going to think about it? Are we going to invest in young people? Are we going to encourage them to be imaginative, to not accept the status quo, to remind them how much things have changed and that these guys that they have lived with their own lives are just here for a blip?
No harsh predictions from your side. Coming back to your call to action, because that's also a very big part in the book, especially addressing us journalists as guardians of truth, right? That's what you say. You put it, democracy needs the unpredictable to stay alive. What do you mean by that, and what does it imply for journalists?
Yeah. It means that we only have true elections if we don't know who's going to win. And there's a lot of easy money to be gained by entertainment, by polls, and by fiddling with prediction. But every time we overuse prediction, we jeopardize democracy. And it's not a coincidence that, for example, in ancient Rome, once people started believing more in the prophecies of emperors than in the republic they had, the republic fell, an empire did come, and the republic never came back. And so it's partly reminding the citizenry of how the future is open and encouraging them to make the most out of that uncertainty and not allowing the prophets to carry the agenda or paint the picture of the future, to remind citizens all the time that the future is ours and not to let go of that control.
But then very practically, due to algorithms, people increasingly consume media that confirm their existing worldview, and they seem happy with it. I mean, you could argue there's a democratic demand for exactly the kind of journalism that undermines democracy. I mean, would you agree, and how to break out of that circle?
I'm not sure I would agree. I think when people are given different options, they take it. And it's often that we're so exhausted, and it's very convenient. That it is convenient. But part of the challenge is to be aware that convenience, while very important in life, is not the most important value, and that everything that is worth doing is probably inconvenient. From reading a book to certainly writing it, and to having friends, having a family, building anything is very inconvenient. And so part of what the challenge is, and it's not easy, is living less according to the algorithm. If we follow what the algorithm wants us to watch and wants us to read, we are narrowing our agency. And I'm not sure that people are happy, actually. I'm not sure that people are happy with that. So, for example, in the industry of TV, there is a crisis. People don't want to even watch TV series anymore. And I think there are many things going on. One of them might be that our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. But I wonder if another important element is that we have been relying enough time on algorithms now to choose TV series that we're just rehashing all the TV series, and we're bored. We're kind of bored. And I'm not sure people are happy with journalism either, in general, and it depends on the country and it depends on the population. But I wonder if a kind of journalism that thinks about the antidote to what we're getting might nourish us more.
But what are the kind of stories that we should write on those blank pages that you mention in your book?
I don't know, the kind of stories that are idiosyncratic, that nobody else will write other than you, that you see and nobody else has seen and nobody else knows of, perhaps because it's very local or perhaps because it's a different way of looking at things. And instead of trying to figure out the trend and trying to follow the crowd, to try to lead it, to try to point attention to what you find curious and interesting. Because if you find it interesting, probably someone else will as well.
Against the lure of prediction, you propose curiosity and philosophy. well, there are many, many beautiful phrases in the book. One I particularly wrote down was, curiosity can make us brave. Thank you very much, Carissa Véliz, for being here with us on your international book tour.